Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our CPD in 2023 and beyond webinar. My name is Helene, and I'm the Workforce Development Officer at Western Victoria PHN, and I will be your facilitator for this evening. Alongside me is Jade, Workforce Development Officer also at the PHN. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands and waterways from which we are all zooming in from today. We recognise their diversity, resilience, and the ongoing place that First Peoples hold in our communities. We pay our respects to elders, both present and past, and I wish to extend that respect to any First Nations people connecting in today. We commit to working together in the spirit of mutual understanding, respect, and reconciliation. We support self-determination for First Nations peoples and organisations, and will work together on closing the gap. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. The majority of our webinar events are recorded and freely available on our PHN Learn YouTube channel. Jane has put that link up on the screen. I have our upcoming events on the screen at the moment. You can register for these via our website, and the link will be on there as well. A special mention for our upcoming primary care conference. This is a hybrid conference where you can attend from our 4 regions of Geelong, Horsham, Warrnambool and Ballarat, or you can dial in remotely. The theme for this year is toddler and teen health, and we look forward to seeing you there. For this evening's webinar, all participants will remain on mute. If you have questions, just type them in the question and answer box and I'll ask them on your behalf to the presenter. The question and answers will be at the end after the presentation. Please ensure that your name is displayed correctly, and if not, please use the rename function for the purposes of issuing the certificates of attendance. There is a link in the chat box to complete the survey after the webinar, and we will show this slide again at the end of the presentation. I will now hand over to Maria from the RACGP, who will be presenting this evening. Thanks, Maria.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Jade, for inviting me tonight. So I'll just start sharing my slides. So for tonight, we're going to cover 4 learning outcomes around firstly, to discuss the Medical Board of Australia changes for. Actually, before we go to that, apologies. Yes, my name's Maria Fraser, which is on the first slide, and I look after the CPD operations in the National Office in Victoria. So for the presentation tonight, we have 4 learning outcomes. Firstly is to discuss the Medical Board of Australia, or MBA, changes to CPD for all registered medical practitioners. Secondly is to navigate your new myCPD with RACGP as your CPD home, and how to log your CPD hours. Outline what's on your myCPD's professional development plan. And lastly, to discuss the RACGP CPD solutions and resources available to all our members. So first up on our presentation tonight is really just to give you a bit of a summary of what has changed for all registered medical practitioners across Australia starting on the 1st of January 2023. As you would be aware, all registered medical practitioners will now have to belong to CPD home. That will be strictly implemented by the 1st of January 2024. So there's a bit of a grace period provided by the MBA this year. Secondly is for every registered medical practitioner to have an annual professional development plan, which they have to complete at the end of each calendar year. So the CPD is in a calendar year. Third is a requirement for all registered medical practitioners to do different types of CPD activities to improve the value of your professional development. And lastly is to complete 50 hours of CPD per year. So we'll go through the breakdown of those different CPD activity types according to the MBA. As you can see here in the next slide, the 2023, the RACGP decided to stay within the Triennium period. However, we do understand that the MBA requirement is actually now annual. So for the 2023-25 Triennium, the 50 hours of CPD activities is actually broken down into these different types of activities. The first one is educational activities, then you have your measuring outcomes, and you have your reviewing performance as well. I'll go through the breakdown in hours in the next slide. You still have to complete CPR, but since we operate still on a Triennium basis, you only are required to do that once every 3 years. So once only from 2023 to 2025. And of course, you have to complete your annual PDP and you have to nominate your CPD home as part of renewal of your registration with AFRA. So the breakdown of that 50 hours of your CPD activity requirements, according to MBA, is that you have to complete 12 and a half hours of educational activities. So these are your traditional type of activities like listening to podcasts, attending webinars, such as the webinar tonight, reading medical journals, and attending mostly didactic type of conferences or education activities. The reviewing performance and measuring outcomes must comprise 25 hours of your 50 hours of CPD per year. But in saying that, within that 25 hours, you need to be able to demonstrate that 5 hours of those is actually dedicated to reviewing performance, and minimum of 5 hours is actually dedicated as well to measuring outcomes. And then the rest, which is the remaining 12 and a half hours, is totally up to you to choose whichever activity type you'd like to do. And the great thing we have introduced the start of this year within the RACGP CPD program is introducing the hybrid type of activities. So when we say hybrid type of activities, these are your activities that are composed or made up of 1, 2, or 3 of the different activity types. I mean, 2 or more of the different activity types as mandated by the MBA. So it could be a combination of educational activities and reviewing performance, or educational activities and reviewing performance and measuring outcomes, or measuring outcomes and reviewing performance, or any of the possible combinations among those 3. So the CPD activity types, as mandated by the MBA, we as a CPD home have identified our own definition of what it actually means to assist our members, yourselves, and also our providers in developing CPD activities to assist you meeting your CPD requirements this year and beyond. So when we say educational activities, that means those activities that expand general practice knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So we have a lot of examples listed there as well on the slides. So like I've mentioned earlier, these are your reading, viewing, and listening to educational materials, such as lectures, forums, or even small group sessions. When you say reviewing performance, these are the activities that require general practitioners to reflect on feedback about your work, or it could also be your own self-reflection. So it's a self-evaluation and reflection, which may or may not include direct observation or practice by colleague or case discussions with your peers. So that could also happen in a small group discussion where you're actually talking about cases and exchanging how you manage those different presentations. And lastly is the measuring outcomes type of activities. So these are the ones that use your work data to ensure quality results. So we always get questions around this, especially for those JBs who are not in clinical practice. So that's why we did say that it uses GP work data. So it doesn't actually limit it to clinical data. So whatever data you have within your scope of practice, when you do an evaluation of that and do some quality improvement activities around that to achieve the results that you wanted, some quality results, then we do qualify that as a measuring outcome. So you could do a mini audit or a full-blown audit, not necessarily having to use clinical data. So this is just some examples. These are just some examples of your traditional educational activities. So we have that listed all there. I'm not going to go through them in detail. You'll have a copy of the slides after this session as well for your own reference. But what I'll just like to highlight there is, how do you record your CPD activities? So it does give you some information there on how to record it. It could be that if it's already an approved CPD activity through one of our providers, such as Westvic PHN as one of our providers, then you would expect your CPD hours to be actually allocated to your account automatically, given 30 days notice or within the 30 days of your attendance or completion of that CPD activity. Another option is if that activity you have completed is actually not RACGP approved, so it doesn't carry our logo of approval, then you still can access, you can still actually quick log that through your myCPD account, and I'll show you how to do that later on. In terms of evidence, you probably are aware that the Australian Medical Council criteria for CPD homes, one of their criteria is to actually demonstrate that we do an audit of 5% of our GP CPD records. So to address that, when you get audited, these are some of the examples of evidence that might be asked of you. And as you would be aware as well, AFRA does conduct their own regular audits. And again, these are some of the example of evidence, some examples of evidence that they might require you to provide. In terms of reviewing performance or measuring outcomes activity, so some of the activities that actually are reviewing performance, you could also dovetail to it some measuring outcomes type of activity. For example, here we have given some quality improvement activities such as Plan to Study Act, as well as audits. And for this year, we also introduced a mini audit. So it's a shorter version of the audit. Instead of completing all the 5 steps of the audit, you only have to do up to 4. So that means you don't have to do a repeat audit. So again, it tells you how to record that. If you decide to do a mini audit or an audit together with your peers, for example, within your practice, you can actually nominate just one member of your practice team to submit the mini audit completion on behalf of the whole group. And I can show you how to do that as well later. So that's through your log option on your myCPD account. And that's called a GP-led activity. However, as you would also probably be aware, there's a lot of audits that's already on offer by some of our providers. So you can also opt to complete those, and again, your CPD hours on completion will be uploaded to your account automatically by that provider. In terms of evidence, for example, for an audit or even for a Plan to Study Act, we do request that you do not provide any identifiable data. So that's for privacy reasons. So we ask that you keep those for yourselves, but an example of an evidence would be the outcome of the audit without having to provide the actual patient data, for example, in that case. Then we also have examples of group learning activities. So all of these activities, we have actually created guides and templates that you can use. We recommend that you use the template, but it's not a requirement. It's just easier for you to keep your own evidence when you already have that kept within the same template for that specific CPD activity. But again, as I've mentioned, it's not a requirement. It's up to you if you want to use your own template. That's perfectly acceptable. I'll show you where you can find it as well on the website. Now, before we go live on the RACGP website to look at your myCPD dashboard, I just want to check with Elaine or Jade if you have any questions that you'd like to cover now, or do we keep them all at the end of the session? I'll have to stop sharing.
I do have a question, Maria, from a GP asking, because we haven't accredited this meeting tonight. So do they submit this as a EA?
Quick log.
Yeah, as just an EA, an MO, or an RP?
Yeah, so this will easily be a quick logged activity, and I'll show you how to do that later.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, via quick log.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions at
Thanks,
this time.
Elaine. Fantastic. All right, let's just click on this. Has that changed for you, Elaine?
Yes, you're on the login page of the
Fantastic.
RACGP.
Thank you. Sometimes it just doesn't work, so just wanted to check. That's great. So at the RACGP homepage, sorry, that changed again. Let me just bring that up. So I'll just log in. So when you go to the landing page and just put in your account details. So when you log onto your account, you can see on your landing page is your dashboard, where it actually gives you an overview of the total hours that's required and the annual requirements that's required as well as the RACGP requirement. So with the total hours, that's over 50, and then you have the annual requirements, which are your educational activities, reviewing performance, professional development, and your measuring outcomes. So the 3 different activity types, and then your professional development plan, which is the number 4. In terms of the RACGP requirement, that is your CPR, which is only once every 3 years. Instead of saying CPR, we actually refer to it as the RACGP requirement because the MBA gave us the approval to actually nominate that and make that as our specialist high-level requirements for JPAs, for specialist JPAs. So that's why we refer to it as RACGP requirement. So how do you log your activities? So if you go over here at the top, there's the log option there. So if you click on it, there is an option to quick log. So let's go to that first one, quick log. And let's say, for example, for this one, CPD in 2023 and beyond is the webinar tonight. And I'll put that the date for tonight. And we are booked for an hour. Let's see. Of educational activity, because this is pretty much an information dissemination. If you could write some of your notes if you want. So let's say put some notes in there. You also can upload evidence there. So for example, is your registration to this webinar. That is optional, so that's you're not required to upload anything there. And then you just click on submit. Then it says your quick log submission is being processed and will appear in your CPD statement within 5 minutes. So let's look at the history. See, it's actually there automatically. CPD in 2023 and beyond, and it's given you an hour, and it's also identified that it's an educational activity, CPD. If you made a mistake, you can click on these 3 dots. You can edit. You can edit that. So let's say, for example, actually, I only did, sorry, that's still taking some time. So give it a bit of time, but it should come up here, and the details should allow you to actually edit that. So for example, you can edit the date, you can edit the type of activity, and the hours that's actually allocated for it. So if you go back to log, if you want to submit your CPR, there's a dedicated section for CPR. If you click on that, it'll take you straight to the CPR form. It asks for very basic questions. This will be pre-populated when you're using your account, but because my account is a bit of a mix of a program coordinator as well as a JPay type of access, it doesn't pre-populate it for me. Then you just put the activity, which is CPR, perhaps put in the year as well and you did it. The MBA only approves CPR as educational activity, even though we did try to put it through as reviewing performance because you're being assessed for your practical side of it, the practical test or component of the CPR. Unfortunately, it's only been given approval as educational activity. So you input there whether it's 2 or 3 hours of CPR, the date when you did it, and it is a must to actually attach a copy of your completion certificate for your CPR. Okay. And then we go back to the log. The next option is advanced life support. Again, when we click on that, it will take you straight to the advanced life support form. Gives you all the information that you need to fill out. The next option is the GP-led activity. So this is where your practice meetings, your peer group learning, your audits, mini audits, as well as your plan to study act. This is where you'll have to submit them. And if you have a specific requirement, for example, if you have a women's health requirement with RANSCOG, then this is the form that you also have to select, but only if the activity completed is not accredited or approved by the RACGP. And you would know if it doesn't have that logo of approval. So before we go to this GP-led activity, I'd like to show you first the other sections of your dashboard. So you can see here, because I've already quick logged 1 hour of educational activity for the webinar, it comes up here. So it says you already have 1 hour over the 50 hours total required for the year. And that appears under educational activity as 1 over 12.5. And you can see this ring, the donut or the ring, is also adjusting according to how many hours you've already completed. And that will happen the same with reviewing performance and measuring outcomes. The difference, though, the reason they're combined together is, as you would remember earlier, you need to do a combined 25 hours. But down below here, it actually also breaks it down into the minimum of 5 hours each that you have to complete for reviewing performance, as well as for measuring outcomes. So that will also do their own count here down the bottom. And of course, that will appear here once you've completed 5 hours, then it would say you've completed 1 of the 4 requirements. If you've done 5 hours reviewing performance, once you've done 5 hours of measuring outcomes, then you've met 2 of the 4 annual requirements. And then the professional development plan. So I'll show you if you click on that. So here you can see that you actually have 2 options for your professional development plan. You either do the RACGP PDP tool, the professional development plan that we've developed for our members, or you can do your own and upload it here. So if you already have your own Word template that you want to use, you just do that, do your reflection towards the end of the year, and then you just upload it here. But what I'll show you tonight is the RACGP tool. So you can see here in the tool, it's actually quite simple, and it's only a few questions you have to complete. First up, it asks you what your current situation is. So that basically asks, what's your current work situation? And we also provided a sample response down the bottom here. So for example, here it says, I work in a multidisciplinary practice, but my specific interests are women's and children's health. I supervise registrars within the practice and regularly participate in practice-based peer group learning. So that's very simple and straightforward. And then the next is it's asking you about your learning goals for the year. So briefly describe the goals to help you, your goals to help you maintain and add value and or extend your scope of practice. Again, we have put together a sample response. This has been developed by our GP group in the RACGP. I would like to attend an update on diabetes and on skin cancer excision. I would also be interested in cardiology and chronic disease management, as they are the most common presentations I see in my practice. So that's that. And then the next one is around culturally safe practice. I'm not sure if you've heard, but the Medical Board of Australia also indicated additional CPD program level requirements. So one of those is cultural safe practice, and there's also professional and ethical practice, and as well as health inequities. So those are the 3 different CPD program level requirements. So for this one, we've already incorporated the cultural safe practice, so you can reflect on it early on your PDP. So the question there is, how will you improve and apply your knowledge and understanding of cultural safety for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to your scope of practice? Here's an example that's provided by our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander faculty. It says, I will ensure that we display Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags in our practice and acknowledge traditional owners of the land where our practice is located. I will use culturally appropriate materials and patient information in our practice. I will reach out to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health organisations such as VATCHO for further training and or resources on culturally safe practices. So that's just an example. Now the next section is myCPD activity plan. So as you can see, it actually indicates it's optional. This is designed to help you plan your CPD activities throughout the year. So in this case, it's asking you, what are the educational activities you'd like to do or you are planning to do for your CPD year this year, 2023? So if you click on that, it actually gives you some drop-down options to select on. So for example, if you're ready, I'm sure as most of you would already be involved in practice meetings. So let's select that, for example. And it also gives you an option to have a bit of an estimate of how many hours of practice meetings do you actually do in a year. So let's say even if it's just once a month practice meeting at an hour, so that's already, let's say you missed one or two, 10 hours already of educational activities in a year. Reviewing performance. So some examples of reviewing performance would be case-based discussions and reflection, developing patient resources, all of these other different things. So let's say you do a lot of case discussions with your peers. So in a year, how many would case-based discussions you would have done with your peers? Let's say you would have done easily probably 12. That already meets more than the minimum required reviewing performance for a year, which is 5 hours. And then lastly, measuring outcomes. So let's click on it again. So it gives you the different options: audit, formal certification, mentoring, mini audit. Let's say you did a mini audit in your practice with your peers. And for a mini audit, we actually estimate that it would take at least a minimum of 6 hours. So let's say that's actually already 6 hours. Let's say you only did one in a year. But even just doing one mini audit in a year will already give you more than enough hours to meet your 5 hours minimum for measuring outcomes for the year. So you already have 28 hours of planned CPD activities, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we haven't captured. That's only 3 different ones, and I'm sure you do a lot more than those 3 in a year. But if you decide not to complete that, that's also fine. You can just ignore that and move on to the annual reflection, but we highly recommend to only complete the annual reflection towards the end of the year. So that's when you have already completed all the planned CPD activities you have for 2023. And then at the end of that, towards the end of the year, once you've done your annual reflection, you have an option here to actually log how many time do you think you've spent doing your PDP. So when we say doing your professional development plan, it's actually just completing this form on its own. It doesn't include you actually going and doing the different CPD activities you planned for the year. That's separate because it's going to be recorded separately to your PDP. PDP hours is basically the time you've spent completing this actual tool. So let's say, for example, you have spent 2 hours completing this, or probably even just an hour. And once you have submitted your PDP, that 1 hour of reviewing performance will also be automatically submitted on your account through your myPDP. Alternatively, you can save it as a draft and you can come back to it later when you're ready. So that's pretty much your PDP for the year. Now, the other option is, so if you go back to myCPD dashboard, your landing page, and we go to the resources. So this is what I was talking about in terms of the guides and templates that we've developed for our members. So let's click on this. So you can see here, there's some CPD solutions we've already packaged for you. If you want to view some RACGP events, and these are the guides and templates. So let's click on this. So you can see here different guides and templates already pre-made. Evidence-Based Medicine Journal Club, if you're involved in general practice research, if you're already involved in a peer group learning, which I believe is actually a few already set up in West Vic PHN, mini audit and audit, peer-reviewed journal article, if you have written an article that's been published or at least accepted for publication, plan to study act, supervised clinical attachment, and random case analysis. So these are all ready for you to download and use. Now, say for example, the other one that hasn't been up, that we haven't put up there yet, is the practice meeting. So, but we have already developed a practice meeting guide and template as well, which I can share with Helene and Jade after this session tonight for distribution to this group. So let's say, for example, you have already set up your pre-group learning or even a practice meeting. How do you submit that? So on behalf of the group, let's say you have 20 to 25 JPs in your group and you have completed the first quarter of your practice meetings, the first 3 months, or maybe the first 6 months. It's totally up to you on how you would like to determine when you submit the completed hours on behalf of the group. So you go to log, you go to the JP-led activity, and here it is. This can be completed by individual JPs, so for example, for solo JPs as well, and at the same time for a group of JPs. So for example, you have done a peer group learning. Once we have the practice meeting, it will also be up here for you to choose to tick. For these group-based activities, we ask that you only nominate one JP within your group or within your practice to do the submission on behalf of the group. So whoever is the JP lead will have to put their details in here, the RACGP ID, the title, and as a group, you also decide on how you have broken down the different hours into the activity types, whether how many hours have been spent on educational activities, how many hours been spent on reviewing performance, like case-based discussions, getting feedback and providing feedback to your peers, or if you've done a mini audit or plan to study act as well. And it will calculate for you the total hours. It also asks you for when you started and when it's been completed. And this is where you put the rest of the participants' details. So all of those who participated and completed agreed hours or meetings, that's the only thing. But this is that everyone would have to have done the same number of hours because this particular form doesn't allow us to actually only allocate this many hours for this JP and that many hours for that JP. So it will be a group agreement to say everyone would have completed, let's say, at least 5 hours for the 6 months of practice meetings or peer group learning meetings. So you input the last name of the JP member, RCGP ID, and then you just add JP. So this will keep populating up to 20 or 25 JPs within the group. So once you've done that, there's just a few more questions. Just prompting you, why did you decide to do this activity? What was the summary? What was it? Just provide a brief description. What did you do? What did you learn? Did you make any changes? And whether everyone's needs were met and how relevant it is to everyone's practice. Now, again, the file upload, which is the evidence, is optional in this case, as in all of our forms for JPs at this point, except for the CPR and advanced life support. That's mandatory evidence. So in this case, it's up to you if you want to upload the template, which you've completed, which we have provided under the resources tab, or your own template if you wish. And then just click on agree and submit. And give it a few minutes, and then the hours will be allocated and reflected to everyone in that particular group. So that's that. So if we go back again to my CPD dashboard, specific requirement, I'll just go through it quickly for those of you who might have specific requirement. So that's a separate form, but in essence, it really has the same information as the other form, except for this one. It actually, you'll have to take which specific requirement you're actually asking for. Say, for example, there's a few GPs in your group who actually do have women's health requirement with RANSCOG, then you have to take women's reproductive health. But when you do that, it will actually ask you to provide evidence. So it could be a copy, ideally a copy of the agenda that demonstrates at least 50% of the topic actually covers women's health. If you're unsure, you can also get in touch with us and we can provide you with a list of the topics that actually belongs to that particular specific requirement. So the other bit, I've shown you the different resources. I'll go back to that and browse some of the CPD solutions as well. So we put together a few different scenarios for our members, for you. So for example, here, For a full-time or part-time GP working in a practice, these are some of the examples that we are recommending that you could probably be doing to meet your 50 hours. Probably a little bit. See if I can make it bigger. I'll share a link with you all as well. For a GP supervisor, there's a few options there. GP with a specific interest, a locum GP, GP working in a rural or remote setting, GPs who's working in a hospital or other specific setting, GP medical educator, academic or researcher, GP who are not in clinical role, and yep, that's about it for the GP solutions that we have available online. Now, to browse the different approved activities by the RACGP CPD program, you just click on the browse. You can search by putting in keywords. So let's say, for example, diabetes. Click on search. See, will bring up all the activities. There's 22 results of CPD activities that actually cover diabetes, it says. And 21 of them are educational activities, 18 reviewing performance, and 4 of them are flagged as measuring outcomes. You can also search, if you also want to do a search by external provider activities only, or RACGP led only. Also, if you only just want to look for measuring outcomes activities, it's 46 altogether. If you want to look for blended activities, so these are there's an option for virtual, face-to-face, or things you can do in your practice. If you only want to do virtual, there you go. So your webinars. If you want to select by specific requirement, so say, for example, mental health, CPD, so it'll bring up all the different mental health CPD activities already approved in the system. Also, if you're looking for specific rural CPD activity, you can tick on that. If you only have 2 hours, you have free 2 hours and you want to do some already approved activities, so you just click on that. If you want to do it as well by state or by date. So these are all the different options that's available to you to do a search. I think we've covered them all. Let's go back to, that's the history. We've covered that as well. We've covered all your log options, your browse, and let's go back to your landing page. And of course, this is where you download the CPD statement. Now, if you still haven't downloaded your CPD 2022 certificate, you can still access it from here. So if you click on your myCPD 2022, it will take you to your, see, here is the certificate of completion. I don't have one because I'm not a GP, but for GPs, it would be available here for you to download. So that's that. And otherwise, that's about it really for the 2023. Thanks, everyone. I'll stop sharing so we can look at some questions, Elaine. Thank you.
Yes. First question, Maria. Do you get CPD hours for meeting with drug reps, please? Would that come under peer group learning or something else?
So it's with 2023 requirements, there's a lot more responsibility given to GPs, to medical practitioners, to decide their own learning as adult learners. So in this case, if you're able to identify what you've learned from that meeting, what you've gained from it, and you can provide evidence of that learning, even just a short summary of what it was about, what you've learned, then you can actually put that through as quick log. But that is a quick log. It's not really a peer group learning activity.
So it'd just be an EA.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Another question. Why would we download our 2020-22 CPD?
Why would they don't? Oh, if you want to keep a copy of your certificate of completion, you don't have to, but a lot of our members do like to keep their own copy of it as a PDF, but it's always there for you anyway.
But that wouldn't count towards their
Oh,
2023.
no, absolutely not. It's for their
No.
records, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Resolution 2, GP solutions for full-time, part-time. Practice meetings. How do we determine the split of hours between EA and RP? Is it simply 50-50 or as in the example?
Yeah, so for practice meetings, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's really up to the group because as a group, you will determine the topics that you're going to cover in your practice meetings. So for example, it's more about updates, then that will just be educational activities. But if you're looking at having some case-based discussions, then that falls under reviewing performance. So again, the freedom is actually, the onus is back on to our members, to the GPs to decide for themselves and agree among themselves on the different types of activities they want to cover as a group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you did more than 50 hours this year, can the extra hours be carried forward to next year?
That would be great. Unfortunately not, because we do have dates. So they are actually, they're date stamped. As you would say, if you get audited, you have to be able to provide evidence when you actually did it. And that's quite hard when you have evidence you've done it last year and you want to claim it for the following year. So unfortunately not.
Okay. I don't actually have any more questions at this stage by the looks of it. Anyone got any questions? Please pop them in quickly and we get Maria to answer them. We've got the link there for the evaluation, so please make sure that you fill that out.
We have one here, Helene,
Yeah.
from Kate. Thanks, Kate. What does time with supervision of registrars count as? And also, is having medical students sitting in? That's a very good question. So if you're actually doing the supervision of registrars as part of the profession-led training that's now with RACGP, so if you're within that, we actually are looking after that. So all the GP supervisors that are working with or for RACGP as part of that profession-led training starting this year, your hours, CPD hours for that will be allocated to you by the RACGP. Don't have to do anything at all for your own recording. We will record that for you. And that's normally a split, though. Most of that will actually be reviewing performance. Same with medical students. So we do actually no, a little bit different with the medical students. So at the moment with the medical students, we are working with a number of universities across Australia. I've just been in touch with Deakin University. I have yet to hear back from them because what we're proposing is that if we can make the process easier for universities so that by the end of each term or every academic year, they can just send us a list of the GPs who's been involved in teaching or supervising medical students through that university. We will also do the uploading of hours as provided by that university. So that's where that's at. Alternatively, if that's not the case, you can always log or quick log.
Is there a deadline to complete the PDP?
It's by the end of the year. So a PDP is an annual requirement, so you have to have completed it before the 31st of December each year. And really, it's very flexible. So if you have already completed all your planned CPD activities for the year, you've already hit your target of 50 hours and the different activity types within that 50 hours, you can already do your reflection. That's totally up to you. But we do recommend to wait until towards the end of the year or once you have completed all your CPD activities. Thanks, Elaine.
Just going back to that supervisor one, does this include secondary supervisors?
Yes, it does.
Yep. For a journal club, why would we need to complete the template rather than have each GP log their own attendance each time?
Yeah, like I said, it's totally up to you. If you would like individual GPs to log it each time as you go, that's perfectly fine. We just find that some groups, especially the bigger groups, probably prefer to just do it all at the end of the agreed hours, so just one GP who facilitates it on behalf of the group actually do it. I guess it works more for practice meetings because in that case, a practice manager could also provide assistance in doing that on behalf of the group.
Is culturally safe training mentioned in the PDP mandatory?
I believe, let me just go back quickly on that, on the PDP. It is a required question in the PDP.
Thank you. Whose responsibility is it to pursue/provide the CPD training in clinic service by contracted GPs? Is it the organisation or the contracted GPs or both?
I'm actually not quite sure around that question. I can take that back and give the answer to Helene to communicate back to Kayleen.
Thank you.
I will copy that right now.
Okay. I don't have any other questions at this time, so we may finish up right there, but please, if you GPs, if you think of anything or you're not sure on anything about the new Triennium, either email myself or you can contact the Vic RACGP. They get back to you, I know, because I have phoned them numerous times when I'm not sure on things that I'm doing, and they've been extremely helpful and point me in the right direction.
Thanks, Elaine, for that. Actually, I do have an answer to Kayleen. So whose responsibility is to pursue or provide a CPD training and clinic service by contracted GPs? Is it the organization, the contracted GPs, or both? It really is, it depends. So in some cases, some practices actually are quite proactive and they do it themselves. Unfortunately, in some cases, it's not the case. So the GPs will actually have to do it themselves. So it really depends on how proactive or what the arrangement is with your practice. But what I would recommend is to encourage your practice to do that and just get in touch with us. We're more than happy to assist practices themselves to facilitate this on behalf of the GPs in the practice. At the moment, we're developing CPD in your practice toolkit. So it's a one-page flyer that will actually outline everything that can be captured within the practice, that someone in your practice or even individual GPs within the practice can easily record what they do in the practice through a quick log or log.
And the presentation slides, somebody's asking if we can email them. I'm sure, Jade, that we can do that. I think we normally do that, so we can. And this is also being recorded if anyone wants to look back on it or pass this along to their colleagues. So we quick log 1 hour EA for tonight, correct,
Absolutely.
Maria? Yes, that is correct. So you're off to a start there. And we here at West Vic are putting in lots of applications for different activities and stuff like that. So that should be all good.
Fantastic.
Ordering on YouTube. Yeah. So thank you, Maria. Appreciate that very much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.